Welcome to the Romantasy Library.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Romantasy Library. I'm your host, Kate Perkins, and today I am interviewing Vanessa Lacey. Her pen name is BB Lacey, and she's a fantasy author. Vanessa has written the duology Long Live and Forever Reign, and she will be releasing In the Wake of the Wicked on November 14th. And this will be the first book in a series of interconnected fantasy standalones. So, welcome to the podcast, Vanessa. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing okay. It's disgustingly hot where I am right now in Kansas City. Whereabouts are you in the world?
I'm in Austin, Texas, so yes, it's
Oh,
very hot.
nice. I have not been to Austin. I've heard really wonderful things that it's a great artist community, like fun music. I don't know, it's a creative culture. Is that true?
I mean, we've only lived here for 2 years, and we're
Okay.
kind of homebodies,
Okay.
so we don't get out that much to like explore those
Uh-huh.
things. But I do know, I mean, it's like the food and music and artist capital of Texas kind of thing. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, there's a lot. There's a
Yeah.
lot to do. We just haven't done much of it yet.
Gonna to explore. Yeah, 2 years is not that long. What brought you
Yeah.
to Austin?
So I feel like it's always a convoluted story because it's my job, but it has changed over the years. Out of college, I was working for this bookstore at Texas A&M, which is where I went to school.
Uh-huh.
And when I graduated, they offered me a position to go run our store up in Orlando. So my husband and I moved to Orlando, Florida, and we were there for a couple of years. But COVID kind of COVID, a lot of small businesses didn't make it out of COVID. And so we ended up having to shut the store down and they moved us back to Texas. So I still work for the same people. I'm just no longer running the bookstore. They just wanted to keep
Mm.
me on as kind of like their bookkeeper, personal assistant, office manager kind of thing here in Austin. So it worked out well.
Yeah, cool. Do you enjoy it?
I do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not an incredibly taxing job. And
Mhm.
but that means I save more of my energy for writing and this new endeavor. And so I'm okay that my job isn't super, I'm not really growing in it, but I'm okay with that because I'm growing in other areas, if that makes sense.
100%. I was gonna say, I bet it's a perfect fit for you right now as you're writing because
Yeah.
you can go to work and then leave work, and then you get to
Yes.
focus on creating these fantasy worlds. While you're at work, I wonder, do you ever find yourself imagining or getting caught up in some of the worlds that you're creating? Is it hard to turn off writing when you're at work? I guess is my question.
Yeah. And I still do, like, if I think of something that, will help me brainstorm through a plot point I'm struggling with or, anything, I will like take time for a second to go write it down or to take notes. Like it's not
Sure.
a super stringent work day job, so
Yeah.
um, I definitely do. I don't always leave the book stuff for home. Sometimes I might do a couple things, like in my
Mhm.
break or something, or at lunchtime, like jot
Mhm.
something down.
Yeah. Do you guys have kiddos or anyone else in the home that you guys are family in Texas?
We're both from Texas. I'm from the Dallas Arlington area, like in North
Mhm.
Texas, and Taylor's from Houston. My husband Taylor's from Houston. So we were both born and raised here, and then we both went to Texas A&M, and that's how we met. And then
Yeah.
we got married and moved to Florida, and then moved back to Texas.
Oh my
So we've been
gosh. Lots of moving.
back and forth.
Yeah. Could you share a little bit more about your writing, your current series, the duology Long Live and Forever Reign? And then I would love to talk about the book coming out in November. So I don't know if you could give like a synopsis. I know that's a lot. I just asked you to give a synopsis for 3 books, but
Oh no, you're fine.
without spoilers. No
Yes.
spoilers.
Well, I've had to learn how to like give the elevator pitch for the
Uh-huh.
duology because I've done a couple of events so far. And whenever you do these book conventions, like people are coming up and they're like, "Tell me about
Yeah.
your book." So you have to like have something. But Long Live and Forever Reign, it's an epic fantasy duology, and it's the story of this young woman who goes she goes on this quest. She meets four immortal beings who each control a different element of nature, so earth, water, air, fire, and they've all been asleep for 1,000 years, but now they've been woken up because there's this dark force that's coming and threatening to throw off the balance of nature. And so they end up joining forces with the protagonist, the female human, um, and they go on this quest to stop the dark foe. And you find out things aren't always as it seems as you go throughout the duology.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's
That was a great elevator pitch. That was
thanks.
so good.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I know I shared earlier that I've read Long Live, and there were some great twists and some surprises. I love it when, it's not always what it seems to be, and when that's done really well, and you did that really, really well.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
really did enjoy Long Live. That was really well written. And it's interesting because I think with fantasy, right, there can be fantasy romance or romantasy. How would you describe your take on fantasy then? Because there is some romance, but not like steam, but like I
Right.
still feel like it's a little spicy with the romance. But
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of fun, to write that. It's a challenge,
uh-huh.
but I
Uh-huh.
love the challenge of like trying to make it still like people who love spice can still say that they enjoy the romance here,
Yeah.
but then people who aren't comfortable with different levels can also enjoy it.
Yes.
So it was
Yes.
definitely like something I really wanted to do was to kind of marry both those
Okay.
worlds. But I think it's probably the technical definition is probably romantic fantasy because it is majority fantasy and then some romance
Mhm.
sprinkled in. I still sometimes will call it fantasy romance or romantasy because those are keywords, like SEO, you gotta find what will like get people's attention. But I don't know if true romantasy tends to be a little bit more heavily focused on romance than what mine are. But that's still a big part of it. I mean, there's still definitely
Yeah.
multiple romances. So
Yeah. So it sounds like that was intentional for you, that you wanted to have some romance, sprinkled throughout,
mhm.
to help those who really enjoy that. And then also though, like meet those readers that don't, I don't know, that aren't wanting as much spice or steam or whatever.
Yeah,
Do you feel like for your series, is that kind of like the plan moving forward for some of your other books as well to keep it romance fantasy? Is that something that you're hoping to continue? Romance
I think
fantasy.
so. I've definitely
Yeah.
established myself as kind of like a no to low spice writer. And
Uh-huh.
I think there's a really big market, a really big audience for people who are looking for that kind of thing, but still want these adult elements and these adult feelings and like things that it's not just YA. Um, and
Right.
so I definitely think that's just who I am as a writer. So that's what all of my books will have.
Yeah. And the tension is so nice in Long Live. Like there's tension with the action, the plot development, right? And the character arcs, and then also those relationships. I felt like the tension and the pacing were really, really well done. And then because it is fantasy, the world building was great as well. Um, but yeah,
Thank you.
it's yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm excited to read Forever Rain. That's on my list to read. And I know earlier too, you were saying the audiobook for that should be coming out.
The audiobook is out now.
Yes. Yes. Is it the same readers for Long Live, or will
Yes,
they be different? Okay,
it's the
cool.
same two narrators.
Yeah, those narrators are amazing.
They did a really good job. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How was that process for you of like, okay, you've written these amazing fantasy books and then now you have audio books of like, it's like hearing your words. I don't know. Is that wild?
It is. I mean, I haven't listened to it all the way through. I just
Mhm.
remember because they send me the MP3 files, and then I go in and like I pull scenes that I know I want to use for marketing and whatnot. So I've listened to a large chunk of it, but I haven't listened to it all the way through. But
Yeah.
I know that I mean they did a great job, and I hear that from everybody.
Yes.
People love them, and so I'm really glad that it worked out. And it is crazy to hear my words sometimes, but I think I also disassociate a little bit. Like sometimes I'll hear a line and I'm like, I don't think I wrote that. Like Did I write that? So it's fun though.
Uh-huh. You're like, man, this author is really good. Did I write that line? Oh yeah, I did. That was me. That was me. That's amazing. Yeah.
But yeah, they did a
Yeah.
great job.
That's awesome. Okay, and then your new series, In the Wake of the Wicked.
That's book one, yes.
Book one. I'm sorry. What's the name of the series then?
So it's just going to be called the Viridian Empire novels because there's going to be four of them, and so they're just part of the Viridian Empire series, I guess, if you want to put a word to the end of
Yeah.
that. But yeah, the Viridian Empire series.
Awesome. So and it will be interconnected but standalone, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. So
Based in that world.
each book will be based around a different like main character and couple, I guess, because it is still romance. And then their story will wrap up in each book, and there will probably be cameo appearances, by the different couples, but their stories will wrap up within each book.
Yeah, I love that. So what led to both of these series, the duology, Long Live and Forever Reign, and this new series, the first book being, coming out in November? What kind of compelled you to write those? I know that's a big
So,
question. And if you want to break it up, break it up.
well, with the duology, I don't really have like one cool story. You know how some people have like a aha moment where they like came up with their entire plot. I don't really have a cool story like that, but I I think it came down to me being really fascinated with the elements of nature and thinking how would the elements of nature act if they had personalities, if they had, different fears and desires, how would they interact with each other, that kind of thing. And then that got me thinking about the elementals, and then the plot developed from there. So even though technically Isla is the human female main character of the duology, the elementals were actually what started it all, and they do have their own point of views. If you've read the duology, it's multiple point of views, but it actually started with them, not with her, and then the plot just kind of came from there after some brainstorming. But yeah, it's all around this idea of like elements of nature having personalities,
Yeah.
and that was really
And
interesting.
that is, I was going to say, I think it's just cool that you've written books. Like when you said that you don't have like that one cool idea or whatever that some authors have for like, this is how my plot came about or the characters or whatever. I think it's amazing that you've written books. I think that is a huge feat in and of itself and super fascinating and interesting process. I find that I think it's just really cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And then the book that's coming out in November, what helped spark that for you?
So I remember I was finishing up, or I was probably halfway through drafting Forever Rain, and I was thinking, this is the end of this duology. I don't have another idea. Like, I don't know what I'm going to write next. And I started, but I never wanted to force anything. So something had always been sticking out the back of my head of I wanted to do a Wizard of Oz retelling. Like, I wanted to do Wizard of Oz something. Um, but I didn't know exactly what. And then it slowly started to
That is
develop.
so interesting. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead. That's so interesting.
And it's not even that I love The Wizard of Oz. I
Yeah.
love Wicked, like the musical Wicked. I don't know if you've ever seen Wicked or heard the music.
Yes.
Okay.
So I in high school I was really into journalism, so shout out to Shawnee Mission Northwest. What? And then senior year, we like the top editors, we took a trip to New York City and we saw the original cast with
Oh my
Wicked and it
God,
was phenomenal.
I would
Anyway,
love to see the original cast.
it was so good. But yes, I'm very much aware of Wicked.
Okay, good. I love Wicked. I actually named the main male character's name is Leo, and I named that's his a nickname. It's short for a different word, but Leo. And I did that because Norbert Leo Butz plays Fiyero in the original Broadway cast.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I have a lot of like callbacks to it.
I love it.
But
so cool.
So it started from me wanting to do a Wizard of Oz retelling, and then I'm not sure if you would call it that anymore. It's not really a Wizard of Oz retelling. It's more of just inspired by different elements of things. So it's inspired by. It turned into more of Wicked. Like at first it was Wizard of Oz, and then I realized no, this is like Wicked is what I. It's Wicked. So, But considering Wicked is Wizard of Oz, whatever. It's all the above. So
Yeah.
that's where that one came from. I wanted to write a Wicked / Wizard of Oz inspired story, and then it kind of took on elements of like the Hunger Games, in terms
Oh,
of
I
like,
saw that.
yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
it's Wicked meets Hunger Games. So that's what
Uh-huh.
book one is, and then I decided. So that kind of that created the plot, in a way, because I took elements from each and figured out how to make them work together. They actually work together really well, because this is kind of a tangent, but like the wizard and President Snow from Hunger Games kind of share some similar elements they can kind of share similarities, if you think about certain motivations they have for things, and anyway, things like that.
I
Um,
love it.
but then it was just going to be a standalone. It was just going to be in the wake of the Wicked, and that was going to be done, and I had to come up with a new idea again. But I put so much world building into this story and realized like it's kind of a waste to just have one book and be done. And so that's when I decided to make it a series of standalones, because then I can keep building on this world that I've created. And then I decided I really liked the idea of having it inspired by stories that I loved as a kid. So Wizard of Oz, Wicked, Hunger Games. So each book is going to be inspired by something that I loved growing up or that I love right now, things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And readers can jump in at any point since they're standalone and interconnected, correct? Or would readers need to start from the very beginning?
I would probably say that. I mean, I haven't written books 2 through 4 yet, but I have a
Okay.
feeling I want to make it as seamless as possible for them to jump in at any point. But I do think that it's probably going to be best to start from the beginning. You just know that each story wraps up, because I think the beginning,
Yeah.
this first one is probably going to set the stage more for the world building part of it. But I'm still going to make sure that I'm trying to make it as seamless as possible. But
Yeah.
that being said,
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can imagine that, like, with and I think it's wonderful when authors do this, of like that piece of like having interconnected standalones where readers can jump in at any point. I can imagine that that is really hard, because then you have to like make sure that you are doing all of the world building.
yeah,
I don't know.
every time.
That would be a lot, and every time, like in each book, and especially if your world building is going to be pretty complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
which it
I
is,
hear
of
you.
course,
So
because
start with book one, everybody.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think
Yeah.
I think you see a lot of interconnected standalones with contemporary, and it works super well there because there's not as much world building because it is our world. Like you kind of already have this, like you
Yeah.
know what you're reading going into it, like you know how all of modern day stuff works. Um,
Yeah.
but fantasy, I don't know if we see as many of these standalones. I know
Yeah.
there's several. Like I know that it's a thing. I know that there are plenty, but I don't think it's quite as common. And I think it's because it's really hard. And so
Yes.
maybe I'm making a mistake, but we're gonna find out.
No. No, trust your gut. And I think, I mean, you know what you're doing. You're the writer, you're the author creating these series. So it would make sense that you follow your own inspiration. Can you share maybe what book two might look like?
So I haven't released yet like what it's going to be inspired by, but I'll tell you. It's going to be Princess Diaries 2 meets King Midas.
Fun.
So
That'll
it's
be,
going to be different
yes.
from
Uh-huh.
because Wicked meets Hunger Games is very, very fantasy heavy, whereas like I have a little bit more freedom with Princess Diaries 2 kind of thing, like with the romance vibes. So I'm
Uh-huh.
excited.
That's awesome. Did you enjoy Princess Diaries growing up? Was
Oh,
that
yes, I love it, love it. I just watched them again this weekend.
so good? So good. And Anne Hathaway is such an amazing
Yes,
actress.
so good.
She's so
Her and
good.
Julie Andrews, I love them.
I mean, perfect pairing.
Yes.
Perfect pairing.
Hey yo, time for an ad. My friend Bree is the proud owner of Miles on Paper. It is an online bookstore where magic and adventure come to life through the pages of indie books. At Miles on Paper, they are passionate about connecting independent authors with readers, and they do this by curating unique blind date book bundles, custom book boxes, blind date puzzles, and a remarkable collection of traditionally published books. By the way, Their blind date book bundles are so much fun. I had the honor of getting one myself. I highly recommend. You can find her website at www.milesonpaper.com. Check them out.
When did you begin writing then?
I mean, seriously begin writing not until recently, but my mom tells me that I wanted to be an author since I was 6, and I started reading like bigger chapter books, and then I wrote my first like book when I was in 4th grade, I think, and it was like 100-page, like handwritten, so that would probably be equivalent to like 20 pages now typed, but um,
That's a
it was
big
a
deal for a
fantasy.
4th grader. Yeah.
I remember having my little, like, I had this folder, and I would just keep like adding notebook paper to it, like after I finished front and back, and then I'd like add it to my folder. And I think my mom actually still has it, and so I think that'd be cool one day to go back and reread. But
Yes.
I did not really consider writing that, like publishing independently, until around 2021 ish.
Mm.
And then I really started writing the duology in May of 2022. I had been brainstorming and researching for 6 to 9 months or so, but I hadn't um, put anything down until May of 2022, and then I finished that by November 2022. So it was kind of fast after that. I just finished Long Live by November 2022, yeah, and then I started drafting Forever Rain probably in February of 23.
Gosh, so many authors that I've been talking to have had, really the pandemic sparked
Yeah.
maybe reignited their passion for writing where they're like, hey, life is too short. I got the time. I'm going to do it. I don't know. Did that play a role for you or no?
Um, I think so. I didn't get back into reading much until 2019. So before
Uh,
pandemic, I finally got back into reading more fantasy and things like that in 2019. And then that just grew. And then I found Bookstagram in like 2021, and then realized that independent publishing was a thing. Because I didn't, before Bookstagram, I had no idea that it's as accessible as it is now. So I learned a lot about that through following authors and becoming friends with authors and networking, things like that. And so that's when I realized, like, oh, this is actually, I can do this. Like, I could publish a book. I mean, it's a full time job. Like, I think it was a little bit easier when I was not even published yet. Like, I didn't have. I mean, I thought I was so busy back before I published book one, and then I published book one, and then I realized, oh, this is where like it just picks up. And then every single book I have done since, it's like, I don't know how I'm going to keep doing this with a full time job. So it's a lot.
yeah, that is a lot. And yet, you've published 2 books and now the third one is coming out in November. How does that feel? You're doing it,
I
Your
know it's
inner
kind of
4th grader
scary.
would be so happy. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Sometimes I do get emotional thinking about that, like how
Yeah.
I would tell past me, like, we're doing it.
You made it. You're here. That's incredible. So when you first published Long Live, like after all of that work, and how did that feel?
Well, publishing, and I think almost any author would agree with this. You have a really big high, and then it's pretty big low, like the blues, like post publishing blues, post release day blues. So it was, I mean, the build up to it, and then release day, and everything was huge. And really, it was a little bit emotional, but it was really exciting. And then you do kind of crash, and so
Mhm.
and that happens with every single release. So it's definitely a
Mhm.
roller coaster because you have to you have to pull back through the dip that, like, emotionally you
Yeah.
just kind of you're drained. And so the day of, it was really exciting. Leading up to it, everything, it's been really exciting. And then moments since then have been like my first book con, like just my first everything. It's always really exciting and just feels kind of surreal. Like whenever you have a next first.
That is interesting, and I can't imagine that the dip, yeah, that occurs, because you put in all of this work and effort into publishing, and then you publish, and then it's like, oh gosh. So like, how long does that last for typically, or how long has it last for you going into that dip?
Um, I'm trying to remember with Long Live. It was definitely long. It lasted longer with book two, and I think that's because I knew what to expect, which made it worse in a way. Like I don't know if that makes sense. And also it was the completed series, so it's kind of like saying goodbye to like this part of my life that I'm never going to get back. So it was a lot harder with book two, and it lasted a little bit longer. Couple weeks, like honestly, you're kind of in this funk for a couple weeks where you're trying. I couldn't look at. Well, I still don't look at reviews. It's just not a space I
Okay.
go in. And
Mhm.
for a while there, I couldn't even look at like how it was performing because I just like you have these expectations and you have these goals you want to reach, and even if you reach them, you just think like, oh well, it could have been a little bit better. Like there's just always a higher goal to attain, and so
Like,
it I
not
don't know, it can be really hard. You're hard on yourself, and you're thinking like, what could I have done differently? What did I do wrong? What did I do right? So it definitely lasted. It lasted for a couple weeks. It was really hard.
yeah, that would be an emotional roller coaster. And then, it being the conclusion of the duology, that would have been sad saying goodbye to those
Oh
characters
yeah,
too and what you
I've
created and
cried.
knowing like,
I've cried
okay,
many times.
yes, I'm sure. Gosh, I'm sure. And then that piece too of like, oh my gosh, what could I have done differently or I should have done X, Y, and Z. Ugh.
Yeah.
That would be really hard to navigate. Yeah. Do you gosh, and I'm finding this with a lot of authors, by the way. Are you more of like a perfectionist or high achieving? Is that been you
Yeah.
or more hard on yourself in general?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't perfectionist.
Yeah.
Maybe. I feel like I'm not. I do. I can give myself some grace in some areas, but I'm definitely higher achieving, and I also. But it's kind of contrasted with. I am very pessimistic. That's a I my
That is an
philosophy.
interesting combination.
It is
Yeah,
my
sorry, go ahead.
philosophy, and my friends laugh at me. My philosophy is if you have lower expectations, if you don't get your hopes up, you'll never be disappointed. And whether or not that's a good way to live life, I don't know, but it's how I live mine. So, but one thing that does like even though I try to I try to just be realistic and manage my expectations, and but I still push myself, but I also know in my head I'm not gonna expect some huge outcome that happens to 0.05% of people. Like I have I manage my expectations, I stay realistic, but I still push myself. It's a really weird combination because I still work incredibly hard
Yeah.
I'm not just because I'm more realistic as opposed to idealistic, like I still work really hard. I just tried to tell
Yeah.
myself, don't get your hopes up. So I don't know.
Yeah. You're like,
I don't
make
know.
sense of this for me. No, yeah, I think definitely managing expectations can be a very helpful way to manage any anxiety or depressive symptoms. I do talking with like some of my clients because I am a therapist that like when we have these unrealistic expectations, it can lead to depression and anxiety and shame and that feeling of like, okay, I'm not good enough or I should have done whatever. And shoulds are really not helpful. But I think there's a difference between managing expectations and then being a pessimist,
Yeah.
like,
I think it's more, I'm just like, I try to be really, really realistic and try not to
uh,
get my hopes up about things. And I jokingly am, I can sometimes be kind of negative, pessimistic in settings where we're all kind of, because authors a lot of times will laugh about like, I just want to bash my head into a wall today. And it's like, I'll join you. Like, let's just all go
yeah,
do that. It sounds like a great idea.
gosh,
Um,
yeah,
Things like that. That is how, like,
yeah.
that type of like dry, darker humor is how I cope.
Yes. No, and I mean, you've got to find humor where you can, especially when it can feel pretty high stakes and it seems like though like Vanessa your series has done really well, like the duology. And I mean, I don't know. Do you feel like it's done pretty well? I think it's done well.
Well,
I don't
I
know.
mean, I'm always going to say, like,
It could be doing
it's
better.
yes, yeah, exactly. And I think any author would say that. Like, any author is going to say, it could be doing better. I could be, like, there could be things. But I also am very proud of myself and I'm very proud of the
Yeah, good.
duology. And
Mhm.
I'm very thankful for like the opportunities I've been given. Very thankful that like
Yeah.
my husband is like great with me working on this stuff, and like it's taken a lot of time. I'm grateful for all my readers, like, and it has grown like organically. So I'm definitely
Mhm.
thankful for where it's at, and would never like take any of that for granted.
Yeah. No, I haven't read Right Forever Rain, but Long Live, I think is so beautifully written. And I'm so excited
Thank
too.
you.
I purchased the Aurora crate special
Yes.
edition of it. I can't wait to
Mhm.
get it. I mean, I don't know if you can even answer this. Do you know when those might be going out?
So I think they're actually supposed to ship August or September. So mine was
Okay.
the third box, I believe, and
Hmm.
they just shipped out the very first box, which was to Sanja Odette.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
soon I think they're going to be shipping the second box, and then it'll be mine. So I think what she's telling people is August, September. So
Yeah.
it's coming up soon. I cannot
I'm
wait to
so
hold it.
excited. Yes, it looks beautiful. I'm so excited. They'll also be doing Forever Rain too, right? Because
Yes,
I have to have the completed
I
series.
know. Yes, that will be next year. I can't remember exactly when because you have to work out exclusivity dates and things like that. So it's next year.
Sure. Are you going to be doing any of the Romantasy cons or?
I'm doing both Orlando and LA. So
Okay. Nice.
got a busy.
Awesome.
It's like October and then
Gosh,
February.
yeah. How does that feel meeting fans of your work? I don't know,
It's
of your
crazy. It was
books.
crazy. Like I definitely got very emotional, and there's always still this part of my head that's like, you know who I am? Like you know what my books are? Are you kidding?
Are you
And
sure
so
this is the right? Yeah, you're at the right booth.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And whenever, like, I remember Utopia Con, which was in Nashville, the doors opened, like, to let the guests in, to let the people who bought tickets in. And then the first person, like, through the doors just made a beeline to my table. And she was like, I came here for you. And I was like, no, you didn't. I,
Oh my gosh, goosebumps. I literally have goosebumps. Vanessa, that's amazing. That is iconic.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
it was very emotional. I was like, I didn't know. I kind of didn't know what to say. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you.
Really? That's awesome. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I love it. Dude, and you've only written 2 books and already you have such a great reader base.
yeah. I love my readers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes sense and it's so well deserved. Truly. Like
Thank
Long Live as a debut is so I mean, it's so well written regardless, but this is a debut, right? This is
you.
your first book. Have you written
Yeah.
anything else before this?
Fourth grade. That fourth
Really?
grade book.
Oh my gosh, Vanessa. Sorry, the dog is trying to say
Oh,
hi.
a big doggy.
Yeah, her name is Telly.
Oh, she's
She
so
wanted in
cute.
on the action. Okay, Telly. Yeah,
She's
we love golden
adorable.
retrievers. And out of the series, because I know Long Live and Forever Rain are the 2 that have been published, and
Mhm.
this might be a hard question to answer, but is there any character that you connect with most or that resonate the most with you?
So I will often say Aiden, which is fun. People crack up.
Really?
Yes. So
Yeah.
I have two answers to this. Aiden, I have a friend that I joke with that he's my self insert. So like there's a character where if like if I was going to say something in a conversation, if you were talking to me, it would probably be something Aiden would say too. So I put a lot of myself, a lot of my humor into him. Like um, he's definitely the maybe saying inappropriate things at the wrong time kind of guy. Uses humor to kind of like mask uncomfortable situations,
Mhm.
and he would definitely be the like that's what she said Joker, and
Uh-huh.
that's just my kind of humor. So
I love it.
definitely Aiden in that way, but in a deeper, more realistic way, Isla is definitely she's my main character, and I think it's hard not to kind of write yourself into your main characters. Um,
Mhm. Sure.
and she and I both share a lot of anxieties, a lot of this kind of worst case scenario thinking. We're both
Mhm.
Enneagram sixes. I don't know if you're an Enneagram fan, but
Uh-huh.
I love Enneagram. I love Enneagram. I love
Mhm.
writing with it. Whenever I talk to people who ask me like tips on writing, which another thing, I'm like, I'm not qualified to give you tips on writing, but I do often talk about the
I would
Enneagram.
beg to differ. I'm so sorry. I keep interrupting you. I would beg to differ. You've published 2 books. What?
I know, and
Anyway.
I'm starting to get more like because I have a lot of people in my DMs who ask me questions about publishing and all this, and I'm starting to get a little bit more confident with myself and being able to answer. But initially, I was just like deer caught in the headlights. Like I barely can get up in the morning. Like I don't know, but I love the Enneagram. I love writing with Enneagram. I think everybody should write their characters with the Enneagram. And Isla and I are both sixes, so we're both a little bit more anxiety prone. We really need that stability in different areas of our life. And so I jokingly say Aiden and then realistically say Isla are who I relate to most.
Yeah. And that is, yeah, that's interesting. And so, yeah, so you identify as an Enneagram 6. That's
Mhm.
really, yeah. I can see that in Isla for sure. Um, I'm an Enneagram 4. I'm
Okay.
just making sense of kind of what you're talking about, but
I have found a lot
yeah.
of creatives are fours. Like that's just
Uh-huh.
how fours are built.
Mhm.
You know, like a lot of creatives have that like emotional drive of a four and like the identity
Mhm.
with that comes with being a
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah. And I think the Enneagram, I can imagine too, is so helpful. At least this is what T shared as well in her interview of really being able to connect with that woundedness of like what drives and motivates the character. And then also like how different relationships can kind of come together too, and how people, how they interact with like
Mhm.
the other characters.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is Aiden then, do you think?
Aiden,
And
he is an eight.
uh-huh. He's an 8. Okay. Yeah. I love that you use that as a tool. I think that
Oh
that
yes,
really makes sense to go
all the
deeper
time.
with those characters. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I just want to share, I love the name Isla. That's my daughter's name.
Oh, really? I have had several
Uh-huh.
people tell me that like their daughter specifically is named Isla, and I just love that. So that
Yeah.
actually was not her name to begin with. For probably like 120,000 words, which Long Live is 140,000. So basically 95% of this book, her name was actually Lee, like Leigh.
Oh.
And then I changed it
Uh-huh.
uh, after I'd written basically the entire book. I changed it to Isla. I'm so glad I did. I like
I
Isla.
I'm so glad that you did too. I'm so glad that you did too. I love her as a character. She's so loyal, which makes her a 6 too, right? Let's be real.
Mhm.
She's so loyal. And I know 6s tend to be like information gatherers as well. And I feel like I could see that with her character too. But anyway, I wanted to share that my daughter's name is Isla.
Oh,
And I
yay! I love that.
told my husband, I was like, I'm interviewing the author who anyway wrote Isla.
Oh, I love
So
that. That's sweet.
yeah. Yeah. It's really fun. Okay, so connect with certain aspect like humor of Aiden, but more on like a deeper, yeah, deeper level, Isla.
Mhm. And then in Forever Rain, there's a new point of view that's introduced that I won't spoil it. You can probably guess who it is. That one, surprisingly, I didn't really connect, like relate to him as much, but he was my absolute favorite point of view to write of any of them. So
Uh-huh.
I'm excited to see what you think.
Yes. So Sebastian is one of my faves.
Oh my gosh.
Just like I love him so much. And at first I'm like, okay, so Isla and Rin, but who's the Sebastian character?
Wow. I know. Well, that's what happened to
I
me too.
love
So
him.
I
Uh-huh.
was
I
writing
love
this.
him.
So Long Live was like a totally different book originally. I feel like I could go down some tangents on this. It was, um,
Yeah.
and we can cut some of this stuff because it's probably going to be spoilery. But Long Live, it was supposed to be a series of 4 books, and each book was going to be based on a different elemental. Like it was going to kind of be there, centered around them. But then as I was writing it, I realized, no, this is definitely Isla's story, which kind of made me think I can't really do 4 books out of like the plot calls for 2 books. That's just what I have to follow my gut. Um, but originally, when it was going to be 4 books, Isla was actually going to die at the end of book 1, like
Ah!
because she wasn't the main character of it. Like the elementals were the main
Wow.
characters. And that was going to be that was going to turn Rin, like make him kind of the villain arc for book 2 kind of thing. That none of that happened, of course, because about halfway through Rain was also supposed to be Endgame, so like this is more spoiler stuff. But as you're reading Long Live, you probably get the vibe of something else happening, and I like Sebastian was the villain, the bad guy, and then I fell in love with him.
I love him so much. As I was reading, I was like, why am I getting
Yes, yes, yes.
yes, love him
I
so
fell in
much.
love with him. So about halfway through writing this book, I was like, okay,
We're
I
switching
gotta do
gears.
a major shift here. So then I changed a lot of stuff. But I don't know if you have read, if you knew this existed. So I wrote a bonus chapter for Long Live. That is
Oh.
the scene. It's chapter 43. It's the scene where Isla visits him and she like drinks his blood and visits him for the first time in his room. It's that chapter from his point of view. And it's a
I'm
game
gonna have to
changer.
read
So
that. I have to read
it's
it.
on it's like my newsletter sign up, like get people to sign up for your newsletter, you get this free chapter kind of thing. So yeah, it is
Cool.
I
I'll
love
have to
that
read that.
chapter. And it was I actually wrote that after I wrote Forever Rain, or like in the middle of writing Forever Rain. And so I was already in his head a little bit. And it's just it's so much fun going back to his head. Like I love writing his chapters so much.
He is so intriguing to me as a character, and I love the morally gray, um, male character. And so as I was reading, I was wondering, I was like, is Vanessa going to do a little switcheroony here? But what, by the way, this is going back to what you said earlier. What inspired this shift, the change from Lee to Isla?
I am a huge name. Like I really love names and what their meanings are and how. I mean, I spent so much time trying to pick names for the elementals because I wanted them to like each have something to do with their element. And it didn't. I didn't know what culture necessarily, but like Kai is like Japanese for waves and things like that. So I wanted them to have meaning. Um, and I don't know why. I mean, I really like the name Lee, but I think I just wanted something that meant a little bit more to that
Yeah.
character. And Isla,
Yeah.
of course, is
Right.
like island, and you learn
Right.
some things about her, and that's why I did that.
And I love how Aiden calls her Little Island.
That is another reason. I can't remember when I threw that in there. I think the very first scene that I threw that in there was actually added, like it was added in edits. That wasn't an original scene. But I remember thinking, this is perfect. Like her name is Isla, and I can say Little Island. And now, like that's one of my favorite merch items. Like I have several pieces of merch that are Little Island based, and I just love it.
I love it. And then I also love too, right? Like at one point, does Arden call her Lala? I
Yes,
think,
it's
right? I
Lala.
think that nickname is so sweet.
Yeah, I wanted something. It's very hard to like have a character that's not on screen a ton and still try to show how important they are to the main character. It's hard to show that when they're not on screen a lot, and for you to see that like emotional connection. But little things like that,
Yeah.
like just a simple nickname,
Yes.
can really do that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I love that. And then can I ask too, what Enneagram would Sebastian be?
So his is a little bit harder because he has a lot of trauma, and in the first one, like you don't really get into his real personality, like the base of his personality, until the second book. I think he is probably he's closer to a 3 wing 4 or potentially a 4 wing 3. Like he's one of those.
Okay.
He's either 3 or 4. He's in there.
And actually that kind of brings me to the next question. In terms of trauma, how is that what was the process like of incorporating trauma into the story? Because in talking with a lot of fantasy authors, whether it's romantasy, fantasy, romance, whatever, there are a ton of like trauma and mental health representation in these books. So anyway, what was that process like for you? How did it feel writing those scenes?
So a big theme in this duology is one of loss in different ways, but it's not always uh, the same kind of loss. Like there are a lot of different losses someone can go through. And I'm not saying I've been through all of them either. Like Isla, this isn't a spoiler. You learn it's in the blurb, so you know this if you read the synopsis. Isla has lost both her mother and the man that she loved within just a little short time of each other. And this happens before the events of Long Live, but she's still dealing with that. And so from the get-go, like, you see this kind of trauma that she has to go through. And there are also some other major moments of loss on page that happen later on in the book that you have to work through the aftermath of. But something I explore more in the second book is different ways that you can experience loss. So, like, yes, you have grief, like you losing the physical loss of loved ones. But I also think there's loss, you lose trust in people. You can experience loss of like a part of your identity. You can experience loss of like a deeply rooted beliefs. Like, there's different losses you can have, and they've all kind of experienced different ones to different extents. So that was like trying to work through all of those different things and like getting all of these characters from their points, like to work through these various losses and seeing how you can still find yourself at the end of them. Yeah, that was like incorporating that. I definitely felt, sometimes it felt hypocritical, like as I was writing them, because I'm like, I haven't overcome some of these things. How am I telling this character how to overcome these things? But it also can be kind of therapeutic in a way too, because you can come out the end of it the other way and like learn to give yourself grace because you give yourself grace through these characters, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that perspective. And it is, I can imagine, a very cathartic and emotional like process. Are there any experiences in these books that you felt like you connected with? Any personal experiences?
I can't think of like any specific examples, but just general feelings, I guess, or general like my general experience with anxiety. Like, I'm a very anxious person, and I share a lot of that with Isla, and a lot with the main female character of In the Wake of the Wicked. Her name is Rose. I also really connect to her on a lot of things too. In that same realm, it's always been difficult for me to talk about my emotions with people I'm even closest to, just because in my head I'm always like, you're being ridiculous. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You're fine. It's not like nobody else is going to think you're being sane, basically. So it's always hard for me to talk about things like that. And that was a huge part of how Isla's character develops throughout a little bit more in book 2, of like having this weight on her shoulders that she doesn't think anybody else cares to bear, or thinks that she's the only one like who should be bearing it for whatever reason. And so I think that's a part of what like makes her an imperfect, like, she has these flaws, and that's what I want in characters. Like, I want them to be flawed. I also have thought like a lot of experiences of the last couple of years of how like things are not always black and white. And we all kind of live in these areas of gray, these shades of gray to an extent. And I think many of us, including myself, like, we might work through some of these like darker thoughts or impulses through what we write or what we read, and especially in fantasy, things like that. And it gives us an outlet for that, and it can be kind of therapeutic. And my characters are all very flawed, very morally gray. They all have made these decisions in the past that you're like, I don't know if this makes you a good guy or not. Like, I can't tell. And I think a lot of that, I put a lot of my own like internal struggles with things like that into them, and good versus bad and black versus white and all that. So I think maybe not a specific experience, but just like these internal thoughts and feelings and all that.
Well, and it makes these characters so accessible and feel more real, and that more connected with too as a reader.
That's the goal.
And I think it's interesting. Go ahead. What? I'm sorry.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Well, you're achieving that goal, so well done you. And then I was also going to say, I made a face earlier, and I don't know if you noticed that. The female main character of the book that's coming out in November.
Yes.
Her name is Rose. That's our child's middle name.
Oh. That's so funny. Isla Rose. Aw, I love
Isla
that.
Rose. Isn't that fun?
That's so sweet.
Oh my gosh. Vanessa, more signs that I need to read.
I guess so.
The book that's coming out in November. And then I'll share with my husband. Oh my gosh. Like, although he listens to all of my interviews, so he'll probably be hearing this anyway.
That's cute.
But we're totally going to switch gears. I know earlier you said in 2019 you got back into reading. Who are some of your favorite authors yourself? Like, who are some of your go-to
So
books?
the book that got me back into reading was actually Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. I don't know if you've read her books or heard of
I've
them.
heard of it.
Okay.
I have not read it, but I have heard of that.
So I love her Stalking Jack the Ripper series. It's YA. It's a 4-book series. I think it's just really nostalgic for me now, just thinking back to how it got me back into reading. I love those books. And then of course, like I ended up dipping my toes into like SJM world, like that. You know, whenever you join Bookstagram, like that's the first thing you see. So I did
You
read.
need to.
I've read those books. But so Carrie Maniscalco, that series in particular kind of brought me back into this world, and so I'll always think about that one. I love everything Carissa Broadbent writes. Like she's one of my idols. Love her. Um, I met her this year at a Polycon. I was just an attendee. I wasn't a signing author. I was just an attendee, and I love her. I fangirled. So
Gush. Yeah. Did you gush when you met her?
Well, I didn't because I never know. I'm always like, you gotta like stay cool, you know, like you gotta stay calm. So, but yeah, and I love Emily Henry as well. I'm a more into. I read more fantasy, but I do really like contemporary. And Emily Henry is just like can do no wrong. I love her.
I know. She's so good.
She's so good.
Yeah.
I just read Funny
So
Story
good.
a couple weeks ago, and that was just so good. But yeah,
I
those
mean,
two.
so good.
And I love Raven Kennedy. I love her Plated Prisoner series.
Yeah.
There's a lot of authors that I look up to, but I actually haven't been reading that much lately. Just with writing, I think I've read maybe 8 books this year, and you know, in 2021 I'd read like 120. So it's just that's never going to happen again.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense because you're so focused on creating your own magical worlds and plus you're working during the daytime too, so that would be really hard to find time to read.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you how you navigate like responsibilities of like working, writing, like oof.
Yeah, it's a lot. I write mostly like in the evenings and on the weekends. More and more lately, I've been realizing like I need to have a shift in my priorities. Like I've realized I've neglected some more important areas of my life. Like I want to make sure I'm spending more time with my husband and like doing other things. Like my life does not need to revolve around this. And so I'm trying hard to navigate that better and to like not be so stringent with time. Because I mean, I wrote and published the whole duology in like almost a little less than 2 years. Like started writing book 1 May of 2022, finished publishing book 2 in April of 2024. So I kind of set myself up to like have this really fast pace, and I don't think I can keep that up anymore. And so I'm trying to like let go of those goals, I guess, and set new ones that I'm just as happy with, but that I can still like make sure my priorities in my life are lined up, because it's really draining. It's very emotionally taxing, and I just want to make sure I'm like, you know, putting things that should be first. So I'm trying to slow down.
Yeah. What would you say is like some of the most draining aspects of it? And you also said emotional too, but like
Social media, number one, just like any marketing in any form is the most draining, just because like as writers we want to write, like I want to write, I want to be with these worlds and with these characters, but I can't because I have to market my books too. And so that is definitely the most draining part. um, I I mean, social media has been such a huge blessing in the sense that like I've been connected with so many readers and authors, and I have some really good core groups that I would not be able to do this without. Like I would not mentally be able to get through everything without them. But it is also very taxing to just think like my success or my worth is based on how this performs, and that's not true, but it's what is ingrained in us. So it's really hard to overcome that sometimes, and like to just see numbers, like to see yourself equated to a bunch of numbers, and that's not true, but it's how our mind like makes us feel. So
yeah.
that's the hardest part for
Yeah.
sure. Like if I didn't have to do all of that, I would be probably 10 times happier. But we have to.
Yeah. Moving forward, I know you're going to be writing that series. Any other goals that you have as like an author?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have goals. Like I have more abstract goals, and then I have more like achievable kind of goals. I'm not sure, tangible, I guess. Like I would love to have my books featured in like a big book box one day, and like I'd love to be have like a best-selling banner on Amazon one day, and I'd love to get to a point where like I can help support our family, like just based on just using my books and things like that.
Yeah.
And then there's more abstract things of like I want my readers to be able to find pieces of themselves in my characters. Like I want, and like we talked about, I want to have a healthier balance like between
Yeah.
personal life, work life, author life. I want to have that. That's a big goal of mine too. So
Yeah.
just things like that. I want to attend a book convention outside of the country. Just
Oh, that would be so amazing.
would be
That would
love.
be so fun. Is there one that you want to go to someday?
Well, I would love to be Rare one day. I think I'm on their newsletter list, so I can see like when they start opening up the next ones. But any of the
Uh-huh.
current ones are closed for applications. But I will definitely apply one day.
Yes. Is that the one in Edinburgh
Yes, that's one
or
of
no?
them. They have like,
Okay.
yeah, they've had it in London, they've had it in Paris, they've had it, yeah. So
Oh, what?
yeah,
Okay. That would be so much
I
fun.
know. I really want to one
Yeah.
day.
The Bookstagram community, what can make it so wonderful is the fact that it is a community. And I was wondering if like you've met other authors through Bookstagram or if you have like a writers group that's been helpful and nourishing for you or a mentor through the Bookstagram.
I have a couple of really, really tight, tight knit groups that like we talk every single day, and they were developed either through Bookstagram. Like there's a big group of girls that I met on Bookstagram. We were all readers. We actually formed this group chat before I ever even published. And then from that group, several of us now have all published. And so we all kind of have our own like writers group. Um, and we've all met up in person before, like we've had get togethers and that's been like watching all of us go on our publishing journey. Like the last two are publishing this year. So it's like we have all watched each other go from like newbie author to published to all this. So that has been, it's just such a cool experience, like to watch everybody's growth. It's
Mhm.
amazing. And then I have some other groups that I've formed since we've been published. We all debuted in 2023. And so now we've been going through kind of this process together. And yeah, I mean, without them, I would not be able to get through this whole thing. So it's definitely
Yeah.
been like, I don't know what I would do without the Bookstagram community and what it's brought me.
And then I know that you mentioned too some of your goals for what you want to create for your future. And though, like that piece of like being able to celebrate what you've already done and what you've already accomplished. What's that like trying to celebrate the fact that you've published 2 books?
It's definitely something I should add to my goals list because I don't do a great job, and many of the authors I talked to were all kind of in the same boat
Yeah.
of like it's hard for us to see what we've done well. It's hard for us to celebrate ourselves, and I don't know where that comes from with me. I think it comes from a space of just like, well, it's happened, it's past. I need to look to the future now, and so it's harder for me to like celebrate past wins. Um,
Mhm.
I definitely, if I when I hit new goals, when I hit new achievements, or every time like an audiobook comes out, or I sit and think about like how far I've come, I definitely can appreciate that. But I have to think about it a little bit harder. Like I have to make myself stop and take stock of like where I'm at. Remember that this is not life or death. Like this is not the end all be all of everything. And just kind of appreciate what I've done so far. But it takes more concentration to do that than it does to, complain. Like it's so much easier for people to complain than it is to be grateful. And so it's like something I want to actively try to do better. But I mean, just
Mhm.
as a world, unfortunately, I think it's so much easier to commiserate
Yeah.
and complain. And so
Yes.
trying to shift your mindset, it's really hard. Um, and
I
just on a
can
day-to-day
yeah.
basis, it's hard to find daily wins sometimes. And so I want to get better about that. Of like, even if I've had a really bad day, it's like, okay, something has happened today that's a win. What is it? Like, whatever it may be. So I need to do better about that, but it's a lot easier to sit in your feelings.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, and I think imposter syndrome too is so real. And I've
Yeah.
spoken with a ton of authors that have felt that too. And also being self-published, I can imagine there's some pressure of like, okay, I've published this book and now I need to ramp up for the next. I don't know. Like I think
Yes.
because you're doing so much, there's a lot of pressure there too. Although I'm sure the benefit of like having more control is really nice and wonderful as well because you can set your own release dates, right? And like you can do all of this on your own versus the traditional route, which can be pretty drawn out.
Right, right. It
Correct?
is. We do have a
Yeah.
lot more control as indie. Um, I think there's a lot of pressure, self-imposed pressure of like keeping up with others, which is not a good thing. Like you should not be comparing yourselves to others in that respect. Like you have to go at your own pace. You have to do what's best for you. But it's hard not to feel that pressure of like, oh well, look how many people are publishing 2 or 3 books in a year. Like I should step it up, and maybe that's just not realistic for you, and that's okay. So that's really hard to not compare yourself to other people and think that you should be working at the same level. Um,
Yeah.
that plus
Yeah.
the idea of imposter syndrome, it's a lot.
Even bringing it back to like daily wins or yeah, celebrating day to day what has gone well in terms of the writing world for you, what's an example of that?
I'm going through developmental edits for In the Wake of the Wicked. And so, like, a major win for me today was sitting down and making a list of like major developmental changes that need to happen. So it's like I have a plan in place. Now I need to act on it. So it could be like word count goals,
Yeah.
like you meet a word count goal for a
Yeah.
day, or you like hit
Mhm.
a certain number of page reads or sales. Like it could be more sale based, or it could be um, any sort of like
Yeah.
numerical metric you might set that you want a goal for. Like that could be a win, or it could be, um,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, like for
Yeah.
me, like I said, it was that developmental edit, like getting a plan in place. Like that's a win for me today, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that makes sense too because I think the numerical piece of it is a double-edged sword of what you were saying before of like it all like kind of basing your worth or
Yeah,
the celebrations based off of those numbers and how hard that is. Ugh.
yeah.
But
And sometimes the win
yeah.
is like I didn't cry today. Like that's a win.
Yes. Vanessa, is there anything else that you would like to talk about today or want your readers to know?
I'm working right now on a prequel novella for Long Live, and it's going to be pretty short, and it's going to be free, so it's going to be available to newsletter subscribers and things like that. So that is something that's coming. I am trying to get it done by either. So my birthday is next week. My birthday is July 26th, and so I thought it might be cool to like have
Really?
it done by July 26th, or August 1st is the 1 year anniversary of Long Live. So I had thought about. I'm probably going to be very emotional on that day. But
Yes.
so I thought about
Oh.
having it available by then, but I'm also not rushing myself, like we just talked about, trying to like, you know, um, work at my own pace. So I'm
Yes.
not going to rush it, but it would be really cool if I could have it out by then. So by the time this podcast comes out, just keep an eye out for the free prequel novella for Long Live.
That's so fun. I love that. And I'll I'll be like stalking your Instagram. Oh my gosh, that sounds so bad. But
Oh
I'll
no,
I'll
please
be
talk away.
in your newsletter for any updates that you have. And that's really exciting.
Yeah,
Cool.
I
Yeah, I
just can't
definitely want
stay
to read
away
that.
from this world. Like I love these books and these characters so much. So I just had to go back.
I was just wondering because I don't know, this world that you've created with Long Live and Forever Rain is amazing. Yeah, if there will be any other books within that world, if you could even answer that, or if at the conclusion of duology, it's done. But
Yeah, I think it's done. I mean, I had thrown around the idea of writing a prequel, which I am
Mhm.
now doing in the form of the novella. So it's not going to be a full book, but there is
Mhm.
so much story with the elementals. And if you've read Long Live, you know they have a very rich back history that you only kind of see the end of, like you see the aftermath of. And so this prequel is actually during the Civil War that they experienced, which it like sparks the events of Long Live. So that's what the prequel is. And I had always kind of thought if I were to write something, it would have to be a prequel because the story wraps up really well. Like there's not much I could do after the duology, but there is so much I could do before the duology, like with the history. So I am doing that, but I think this is probably going to be it because I don't know what else I could do with them, and I need to focus on future projects. But I have, I mean, I love it so much. Like it is, I feel like it's coming home every time I write about these characters. So part of me wishes that, I don't know, I guess like as I keep writing, I'm excited because people will hopefully read my backlist, you know, like as they learn who I am, and then they'll read my backlist, and it's like I just can't wait for, I just want like their story to be told. I just can't wait for everybody to like read their story. I don't know. I just love them.
Yeah. No, that's great. And reading Long Live, you know, there is a ton of story that it makes sense to have that prequel, you know, and I'm excited to check that out when it comes out. Vanessa, this has been so much fun. And thank you so much for taking the time to connect with me and talk through
Thank
your
you
books.
so much for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone, you can find Vanessa's books under her pen name, VB Lacey, on her website, Amazon. You can order it through Barnes & Noble, like all the places.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Romantasy Library as I interviewed Vanessa Lacey, pen name VB Lacey, fantasy romance author of Long Live and Forever Reign. It was so lovely to talk with her. I really loved learning more about her publishing journey, her writing process, anxiety, imposter syndrome, all the things, as well as connecting on the fact that my daughter's name is Isla, just like her lead character in Long Live. Who knew? I did because I read the books. So good. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here and for supporting these wonderful authors who write fanciful stories that make my heart sing. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Romantasy Library. There are many more episodes to come with amazing authors. So thank you so much for listening. And if you're feeling generous, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you for being here and helping support these amazing authors. Lastly, Vanessa's website is www.vblacybooks.com, and you can find her on Instagram. She also has a Discord for all of her updates. You can find her books at any major book retailer or order through your indie bookstore or go to your local library. Thanks, everyone.